I've lost count of how many times I have said that I don't want to post any more into this matter, but I just can't keep my word. Like I said in my last post, I have removed my email and any other personal information from the internet, with the exception of this account, which I will hopefully only have to use once more before this is resolved. I have been running for the last month and have managed to evade Casey for most of that time. I've caught glimpses of him from time to time, but I hope that he didn't notice or recognize me. I'm back in my hometown, staying with my parents for the first time in many years. So I will get to the point of this post. I finally remembered what happened on the night Ben's little brother was kidnapped. Maybe if I describe it as if you were watching it on TV, you'll have a better mental picture, so here goes nothing. I had gone over to Don's house to watch TV, and Ben was put in charge. The whole plan of the night was that we would watch Casey's Corner when it came on, and then afterwards watch a movie. I can't tell you what the movie we watched was that night, but I'll never forget what I saw in that day's episode of Casey's Corner. If you are unfamiliar with my last post, then I'll tell you what the show was like. It was about some guy who sat in the corner booth of a diner, drinking cup after cup of black coffee and chain-smoking cigarettes. Every episode, in the beginning at least, would feature 3 stories. A kid would walk up to Casey's table and ask him to tell him a story. The show was somewhat educational, with advice being given, but the stories also had a comedic element to them, which is, I guess, what appealed to the viewers. As the series progressed all the way up to the fall finale, the episodes seemed normal enough, except for the last one. Once the season resumed in January, the episodes got really messed up, like dead children and murder messed up. I can only remember the episodes that I watched all the way up to the fall 1987 finale, at least I can remember actually watching them. The remaining episodes that I viewed of the 87 season I watched this year. Anyways, back to the night in question. So we were all hanging out in the living room, waiting for Casey's Corner to come on any minute now. Ben didn't seem too interested in watching the show, being a teenager, but he humored us and watched it anyway. About a minute before the show was supposed to start, Ben asked, "Hey, do you want me to call for some pizza?" Don and I were ecstatic at the mention of pizza, as it was quite a nice treat for once in a while. Ben nodded and walked into the kitchen to make the call. As he began placing his order, the show suddenly came on, no intro, just thrust us right into the middle of the episode. The camera was fixated on Casey's usual booth, but there was nobody in sight. The screen briefly cut to static, and when the picture returned, Casey was sitting there, looking normal. The shot remained the same for about 90 seconds, and in the silence, I heard a light rustling from the window outside.
"Did you hear that?"
asked Don. "Yeah. Hey Ben, we just heard a noise outside." I agreed and added, feeling a twinge of nervousness, but not knowing exactly why. "It's probably just a cat. Just keep watching his show, guys." Ben replied in that not-caring, sarcastic way that most teenagers respond to their younger siblings. I exchanged a glance with Don, seeing my own unease mirrored in his eyes, and then shrugged and turned back to face the television. I guess while we weren't paying attention to the TV, we failed to notice a small child come into frame.
"Mr. Casey, tell me a story."
"Okay, sit down. What's your name?"
"It's Jason. Hey, what's wrong with your hand?"
"Don't worry about that, Jason." Casey's hands were visibly trembling, and I noticed that regardless of being told not to worry, Jason looked quite nervous. "So, how old are you, Jason?"
7.
"That's a good age to be. Not old enough to worry about the problems of the world, but old enough that people take you seriously when you talk." Casey's expression remained neutral as he spoke, and I remember wondering why he was making that face. He kind of grimaced and smiled at the same time. Casey picked up a cigarette and lighter, then lit it, beginning his story. "I will tell you about the time that my friend and I found a haunted house and decided to go exploring." Casey exhaled his smoke and took a sip of coffee. "We were about your age, Jane and me. One day, we were playing in the front yard. It was the first time that Jane had come to my house, so she had never seen the street around it. I was just playing, not paying any attention to Jane until I felt a tap on my shoulder. I turned and saw her staring at something down the street, and I followed her gaze. 'What is that?' she asked me, and I in turn responded that was the haunted house. Everyone who lived there mysteriously disappeared, never to be seen again. Jane looked like a deer in the headlights, eyes flashing with wonder. 'Let's check it out,' she said to me, wanting to show off. I agreed, despite feeling a bit afraid. When we arrived at the house, the door was closed. I cautiously went up to it and tried the knob. Unlocked. We walked in and then the door slammed behind us, the noise of the echo hurting my ears and probably hers too. It was pretty dark, and the first thing I noticed was the living room with a bookshelf in it to the right. I was pretty curious, and I looked towards Jane to suggest looking at the bookshelf more closely, but she wasn't there. I couldn't figure out where she went until I heard a voice from somewhere to the left. I went after it and came to the kitchen, where I could see Jane standing at the window, having apparently opened the curtains as the room was bright and sunny. With the light, the house didn't seem so creepy after all. The house had a kind of funny smell, like wet leaves and rotten meat, but in the kitchen, I could hardly smell anything. I asked Jane if she wanted to check out the bookshelf in the living room, and she was at my side in a heartbeat. We walked towards the living room, and the smell was getting worse with every step we took. We looked at the bookshelf. I was a bit unnerved at the lack of any dust on the surface, as no one had really lived there for a few months, so everything would probably have some dust on it, right? Anyways, as I was trying to figure out why there was no dust, I heard a low creak from off to one side, and I looked quickly to where it came from, being jumpy, only to see Jane standing on the lowest shelf, reaching for a book on the top. I remember which book it was. The Raven, by Edgar Allan Poe. I remember that because we had just read it in school just a few weeks ago. Jane loved that book almost as much as I did. I guess she intended to maybe steal the book. As soon as she touched the book, the shelf started to shudder. Jane fell to the floor, the book falling beside her, and she started to cry. I did my best to comfort her, and then I joined in the hysterics when the bookshelf started to open. The smell got tenfold worse, and that was all the motivation that we needed to get the hell out of there. Just as we got the door open, we heard a low rasp from the entrance to the living room, but neither of us wanted to see what made that noise, so we took off running. All day at school the next day, we told everyone how we had been in the haunted house and seen the ghost, and none of the kids believed us. The teachers that overheard it looked really worried though, and I kept thinking, why do they look so worried? Jane went missing that afternoon. She had come over after school to play, and when I went inside to use the bathroom, she was still out there. When I came back out, she was gone. I ran to find my mom and tell her about what happened, about how we had been inside of the haunted house, etc., and she freaked out. She tore off, running full on towards the haunted house, calling out for Jane. I ran after her, trying to stop her before she was messed up by the house, but it was too late. So the moral of this story is, you may be bold and think you know everything, but when you hear a story about a place that says you disappear if you go there, don't tempt fate.
Jason was crying as the picture turned to a test pattern, and Dawn and I were left in sudden silence. We both yelped when there was a knock at the door, and then we started to laugh when we heard, "Pizza delivery." Ben opened the door and paid the delivery man, and then shut it and looked at us. What was all that noise about? Neither of us could really find the right answer, so we stayed silent. Ben gave us an irritated look, and then the look on his face turned one of utter fright. We tried to see what Ben had seen, but couldn't make anything out. Ben shook his head, and then we all walked to the table, where we ate pizza in silence. When all was done, I said, "So what movie are we watching?" Ben sighed, and then answered, "I think it's best if you go home, James. I'll call your parents to have them pick you up." I was crestfallen, but when Ben made up his mind, there was no other choice. I'm shaking as I try to write anymore. Just remembering that night made me shiver with fear all over again. There's a rustling coming from outside.
Hello, James. Are you in there?
Oh God, I sure hope that I'm dreaming. Please let this all be in my head. Notification. 4 new videos posted by James Corning. There's a message included with the videos.
Hello, kids. I am glad that you will all experience my show and enjoy it just as much as I did when I made it. Don't worry, I can't come after all of you who click on the links. I'm too old now. I might try and find you though, so just watch your back. Casey M. Weber.
Private message to registered user Donna Talbot.
P.S. I'll never forget you. Don't worry, I'll make sure that your end is quick and painless. This time, your father won't be able to save you, so why not try to run? I may be older now, but I can still find you.
Posted on 3/11/2011 by registered user James Corning.